Alright, I'll talk about Hilda. One of the first protagonists from Pokemon's 5th generation, alongside her counterpart Hilbert, they both have actually remained pretty popular. Now a while ago when I made that Rosa video was mostly because we were going to be getting a brand new card in the upcoming TCG set, Perfect Order, and then as a Pokemon Masters player, Rosa was just a constant in the franchise. But of course, in response to all of your comments, let's go ahead and take a moment to look back at the very first protagonist in Pokemon Black and White. Because for one thing, while Rosa and Nate definitely became more popular later on, having their designs initially called a little too busy, Hilbert and Hilda were pretty popular right off the bat. Now I won't call their designs basic or anything, but they're relatively standard when you look at the protagonist designs throughout the entirety of Pokemon. But with Pokemon Black and White effectively being a big soft reboot for the video games, I'm very sure that they were meant to resemble Red and Green from the Kanto region. While these designs were introduced in Fire Red and Leaf Green, they are the ones that are most utilized. So anyway, yeah, with Hilbert and Hilda, they do maintain that vaguely sporty look that's used in Pokemon, but at the same time they still seem relatively casual, and while not overtly American looking in order to tie in with the Unova region's inspiration, I will say that their clothing was pretty relevant then and is still relevant now. A pretty perfect look for what is now the middle point of the Pokemon franchise. Also, I really do love the colors. They both have red and blue in there somewhere for Pokemon, though I guess with Hilda it's a little more pink than red, but that still counts. And then also they each have black and white and gray, a great way to relate to these video games and how they were named after colors. In terms of things like the marketing and design for these video games, I think they worked really well, and with these being the games that were solidly in the age of the internet, I feel that a lot of the promotional artwork for these games was more easily accessible and thus more memorable. Their involvement in the story of the video games was also integral in them being memorable. Yes, they still are the blank slate protagonists that you're meant to project yourself onto, but with the 5th generation being that bigger step up in the story, one of the big elements that makes these characters feel a lot more involved is how the other characters in the games react to you. Having both Cheren and Bianca as your friends and rivals who meet up with you at various points in the game, and then also just having Yen, one of the big antagonists of the game who you really do get to feel for, and eventually get to see freed from the oppression that he's under as well from Getsus, really drives home the importance of him actually interacting with you, the protagonist. Just with how he's basically fascinated with you and all the moments that you get to spend together throughout the game, do a great job at building him up and really get you invested in that story. Even though they don't appear in the sequel of Black 2 and White 2, their effects and their presence are definitely felt by everybody else there. Even though Hilda was the most popular, I'm actually really happy that Hilbert seemed to be utilized just as much, though when you group them together with the protagonist of the sequel, it makes you realize that they genuinely just had it out for Nate for some reason, not including him in a lot of stuff. I know I brought up Pokemon Masters in the last video, citing how Rosa basically seemed like one of the protagonists of the game because of how much she's utilized, but honestly Hilda probably is just as utilized with how many different outfits that she gets, even actually having a Signa suit where Rosa doesn't. Side note, Victini are honestly one of my favorite pairs in the game just because of how strong they are, but the event that introduced them also got to have Hilbert teaming up with Genesect. And in this game, Hilbert himself is no slouch. He actually is one of the first characters in general to have a Halloween sync pair, where he gets to have this really cool werewolf outfit and is partnered up with Mightyena. So yeah, when I look at everything the Gen 5 protagonist got, it was pretty well done, especially with the first two, Hilbert and Hilda, and we can only pray that Nate gets some more love in the future. Though I will say that Nate beats Hilbert a little bit in the trading card game because he just does not appear at all in any card, in contrast to Hilda, who recently got a brand new supporter card. And it being a modern card, it obviously has the normal version, the full art version, and then the illustration rare, which all look amazing, and I'm glad that this is becoming the norm for some protagonists, though they're mostly only focusing on the girls, except for Ethan recently because he had his own deck, and so I guess that was a reason he also got a supporter card. Creatures really needs to set things up and add all the boys to the game as well. But yeah, as I'm continuing to record this video, it is a really weird case of the names of these characters, at least in English, having them be both so similar. Hilbert, Hilda, Hilbert, Hilda. I guess it makes a little sense because they are meant to be counterparts or alternate versions of each other, because when you choose one in the game, you never see the other, but I'm honestly really glad they didn't keep that same logic going forward. Over in animated media, that is one place where Hilda and Hilbert weren't shown all that much, especially when compared to Nate and Rosa, who had the entire animated trailer for Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, which honestly I wish they would have done even more of those. But later on in the Pokemon Evolution series that takes a look at different snapshots throughout the generations, the episode itself is mostly focused on Getsus and the plan that he has for N and, to take over the Unova region, so most of it is actually his narration and we see things from his perspective as well as N's, and that is where Hilda appears appears in the background alongside her Tepig. And then we also see her later as she's kinda staring down Ghetsis and about to battle him, but like I said, the main focus of this episode is Ghetsis. Even though this episode did come much later, it's a pretty welcome treat because it is a good episode, very much so when you take a look at it in the entirety of Pokemon Evolutions. Typically, the episodes in this series didn't focus a whole lot on the protagonist, instead highlighting other characters, usually bringing in an added element or giving us a different look at a situation that we know from the video games. So I think it gets a pass here, though I would have really loved to see more of her and especially Hilbert, who is not in this episode, because they are sort of replaceable in the context of the video game story. And then when you take a look over at the main series anime of the time, this is where Ash was traveling with Iris and Silent, sort of kind of breaking the trend that had been going on for the past 2 generations where Brock would return as well as the protagonist of the video games. And I get that this was done in a way to reflect the original anime in the same way that the video games did, but it really does make me wonder what things would have been like. Also in Pokemon Masters, Hilda's personality is really interesting. She just really wants to train and battle. I mean, we even see her hanging out with Nemona most of the time. They're truly birds of a feather, which is interesting because from what I know in the manga, she is apparently an actress. Or, you know, this is technically white. Pokemon Adventures gives a lot of these characters different names from the official ones that we see elsewhere, but for the most part, these are all different interpretations that we see of these characters. Anyway, for the main series stuff, Hilda is normally depicted with a Tepig, while Hilbert has an Oshawott, so that sort of rounds out the trio with Hilda later taking Snivy. Well, actually, the boys switch off here and there. In Pokemon Masters, we saw Hilbert with Oshawott first, and then Nate had Braviary, and then in things like the Kotobukiya figures, which get some really nice artwork made of them, Hilbert is the one who gets Victini this time, and Nate is the one with Oshawott. So yeah, things get kind of interesting when you have basically 4 protagonists. I guess that's why later on in Pokemon Sun Moon and Pokemon Ultra Sun Moon, they just kept Celine and Ellie on both versions. But the point is, when it comes to Hilbert and Hilda, I think that they were a really strong start to the brand new era of Pokemon. Design-wise, character-wise, feeling-wise, they are definitely echoes of the past, while being a pretty good blueprint for the future. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below about all of the protagonists in Pokemon's 5th generation, and thank you all so much for your comments on all the previous videos, just kind of letting me know like, hey, you know, I really like this character, you should talk about them as well, because definitely I have a lot of fun taking a look back at some of the history and really trying to understand why they resonated with everybody. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, hype up the video if you're on mobile as well, and I hope you're ready as we all continue to prepare for a brand new Pokemon era with Generation 10. Thank every channel member for your continued support, including the great Gators, Piwas, Mao, Kiko, Kaiser, Noobvi, Jellyfish Sheep, ITC, Lord Jeff, Hype, Pepperton, Beak Deek Joe, Dr. Shaky, AK Jess 413, Ark, Laserbeak 316, Alex with Shiny Hunts, Starshooter, Koi 13, Cemetery Hill, Cheez-It 62, Gator Kid 509, TF, Mathaclock 947, Taijirai, and Quago. If you'd like to support, see your name here, get access to emotes, 4 comments, live streams, sometimes early videos, and our members-only Discord server, you can become a channel member today. You can also follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky as well for more memes. Anyway, this is GatorX, and I will catch you all later.
Adventure over the Unova region and discover more than 150 all-new Pokémon. Pokémon Black version and Pokémon White version out now, only on Nintendo DS. Catch the mythical Victini only from 4th of March to 22nd of April via the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection.